Hey, everybody, welcome to the Dream Big podcast. So glad you're joining us. And this is a place I hope that you find is both fun, safe, informative, but you get a chance to meet a couple people that have been important voices in my life. And I think they might be important voices in yours. And we have Taylor Hughes, who is a really big voice in my life. We've done bus tours together
A
and
lot of shenanigans.
countless
Fed alligators.
yeah,
illegally.
that was our tell everybody that was kind of when we decided we were going to be friends.
Yeah. It's funny because I had known of Bob and read your books, and then I ended up at an event where I was emceeing and you were the speaker, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Bob. And the next thing I know, you're like, hey, do you see this sign? And it said, don't feed the alligators.
Yes.
And the next thing we were doing was like looking for hot dogs.
I just didn't even know that was a possibility. I didn't know there were alligators.
Yeah. So
and
since
I'm like,
day one, we've been getting into shenanigans.
We were like kindred spirits. And then we thought it was during COVID that we did this bus tour. We went with some friends from Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana. It was kind of like a death wish. We went across all of these states that evidently didn't have COVID, according to them. And that was just a really fun time to just spread a little bit of joy in a time that was really kind of felt dark to so many people.
It was good. I mean, a lot of people would come up afterward and just say, I haven't laughed in a while. And I realized doing it, like, I needed that. Like it's always nice when you can do something that helps other people, but then you realize like, oh, I'm actually getting more out of this than I think they are.
And your thing, you actually have a special coming out like now.
Yeah, today on YouTube.
And it's all about wonder and the power of that. So talk about the special, and then why is that the thing that has been kind of a drumbeat in your life for as long as I've known you? It's always been about whimsy and wonder.
Yeah. I mean, I fell in love with magic tricks when I was a kid. We had a family friend who was a magician, and he would come over and just do tricks around the table. And I can't escape. Like, I've been chasing that feeling ever since of seeing your first magic trick. The moment when you realize, like, I don't got this all figured out, but I want to know more about it.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's the best approach to have to life of like, I don't need to have all the answers, but I want to find the answers if they're out there,
Yeah. So for a lot of people that listen to this podcast, faith guides their steps.
Yeah.
And so that idea of getting reintroduced to wonder again, to just let your imagination start running. And the thing about you is that when you do these amazing illusions, I don't feel deceived. I feel engaged. And there's something about that. There's something about people who are trying to trick you, and other people are trying to engage you. So help us understand, because you have a book, Misdirection.
I do. Yeah.
So give this the kind of the theme behind that.
Totally. So it's funny. I've spent my whole life studying how to trick people for entertainment as a magician, right? That's the job, is you fool somebody, and then we get this elation and joy when we go like, oh, he fooled me. Because when you see a magic show, you're signing up for that. But we don't always sign up for that when we're going into work, or we're going into church, or we're going into the voting booth. And yet I've noticed the same tools that I use to entertain have kind of been hijacked to manipulate people in other areas of life. So the new book is really all about that. It's about it's a magician's guide to spotting and avoiding manipulation. So I teach a simple magic trick, and then we talk about how else is that happening in our life.
Yeah. Sometimes people are kind of waving their left hand over, look over here, while they're doing something. And with a right hand that's inconsistent with that, that would be like for those where faith guides their steps. You'd be Paul saying, I keep doing what I don't want to do.
Right.
I don't do what I do want to do. That I don't think that's about an illusion that fails. I think that's about life that happens.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of times we see, you hear stories of something that went sour somewhere, and you go, how did it get this bad? And so this book is really kind of looking at how, what is the progression of things going from being full of wonder and awe and whimsy to things getting off track, and how can we see those patterns and avoid them in our own life so that we don't.
You would think with as many days that we've spent living together up at the Oaks or on a bus or at some place doing emceeing, and that I would know how to do your tricks, but I don't. I've always threatened to go through your luggage rifle through and find out how these things work. But I bet one of the things that drives good illusion is the assumptions people make. So
Right.
the people see this over here and they assume it's one thing when
Yes.
it's actually something else. Talk to us about that. The
Yeah.
assumptions people make, and then how does that work out in manipulation, and both positive and negative?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes manipulation happens because we're taken advantage of, and other times it happens because of our own doing. We allow ourselves to be misdirected because we really wanted to believe in something or in someone that at the end of the day let us down. And so I think it's looking for, there's one of the tricks I talk about is a trick with a salt shaker and a quarter. And you say, I'm going to make the quarter flip over without you seeing, but I don't want you to see how I do it. So I covered up with a salt shaker and covered the salt shaker with a napkin. And then a second later, you snap your fingers and you shove the salt shaker through the table. And the way the trick works is I had to convince you that my intentions were all about the quarter and you weren't paying attention when I snuck away the salt shaker.
Yes.
And so I think in life, as we ask more questions about kind of what's calling the shots in our business life and our family and our communities and our neighborhood, we can kind of figure out what's becoming the salt shaker in our life and maybe what's the quarter that's trying to draw our attention away from what's really going on.
There are the assumptions people make. There was a time, I don't think it's current, maybe it still is, but not much of a car guy.
Yeah.
But when people would be, you pick the profession, they pull up with a fancy car.
Right.
And so then the assumption is, oh, they must be
Yeah.
doing great. Or depending on your viewpoint, they say like they must be spending a lot of money
Yep.
on this car. So that isn't a jaded view. It's just like kind of depending whether you see things through the lens of finance
Right.
or you see the things through the lens of success. And then even through the lens of success, what do you like? What are the pieces of that?
Yeah.
But you might not see somebody with a fancy car and say, I bet they have an awesome family.
Right.
But you might not see somebody with a thrashed car,
Right.
and make assumptions about that too.
Well, and that's the thing with magic, right? Like magic, so often people go, I didn't see it happen, because they're paying attention to what's right in front of them and they're not thinking about what else is out there that I didn't see going on, right? And I think in life that's sometimes where we can lose track, is we make these assumptions about other people that we've got them all figured out and we know who they are, and really we can learn more every day.
Yeah.
I spent many years not just in entertainment, but I also spent many years working at a church. And one of the mistakes I made is I stopped looking for answers and seeking God and saying, what else does God want from me? And I started being the guy who felt like I got this whole thing figured out. Not only do I have the answers for my life, but I got the answers for your life. And it was getting myself into that spot where I stopped pursuing awe and wonder and mystery and the beauty of all of it, and started just being the guy who had it all locked down. And I think that's when we're susceptible to manipulation and misdirection, is when we feel like I've got nothing else to learn.
Yeah, we've had this conversation a bunch about the difference between control and influence.
Yeah.
And most of us don't want to be controlled. Some do, like I suppose in the military, it's good to know who the boss is, and then just you're given an order and you just do whatever that is. But most of us pull back on that. We want to like kind of like apply some of our thought process to it.
Right.
When you're trying to control somebody, it's because you feel out of control in your life. Have you felt that before, that you kind of feel like you're out of control? So you like over-index controlling somebody else because here's the one thing I control.
Yeah.
I think people with eating disorders, I've heard that oftentimes this is one thing I actually can control.
Yeah.
So I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to control this one thing. What things have you found between control and influence and manipulation, how they ricochet off each other?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talk about in the book, there's a whole chapter on misdirection in business. And I think different leadership styles, some people try to control everything and rather than influence, right? They want to just be in control and just do what I say, not what I do. We hear this as kids a lot. Parents just say, hey, it doesn't matter why, just do it. And that's one way to approach it. But we've all experienced people who can kind of take us by the hand and show us a different way to look at things. and we see like the beauty and looking at it from a different angle. And I don't know about you, but like for me, I'm much more open when somebody is like, hey, let me just show you another way to maybe consider looking at this. I'm so much more open to that than someone just saying, nah, this is do what I said because it's the right way to do it. You know?
Yeah, sometimes we give information when we actually want an example. It's
Yeah.
like, just show me, like, that's all the information I need. Somebody who's a good example. They know why they're doing what they're doing. They're pulling it off. I would find it myself if I've like a image of myself that I'm giving out. It's that I'm not this controlling guy, but really I actually have quite a few thoughts about how it ought to work out. So for myself, I will like seemingly release control. If you'd
Right.
ask the people who work closely with me, it would be like seemingly release control, but yet I still have some really strong ideas about how I want to see this thing work out,
Right.
how I want to see it shake out. And I'm not apologetic about that. I just recognize that's how I'm wired. And they're like every wave, there's a front side and a back side to it. Front side, which is the awesome part, is a
Right.
lot of things happen the way I was hoping they'd happen.
Yeah.
The back side of it is it could, by following up, you could annoy somebody because you're like actually,
Right.
the impression was that you gave it to them, but you're still hanging on to those strings of control.
Yeah.
So what would you say is a way to navigate that for all of us?
Yeah, it's a big balance, right? It's one thing to say like we want to not, I want to be laid back and relaxed and just go with the flow, but at the end of the day we feel these pressures of I think a lot of it is the pressure of having to be perfect. Like I don't want to mess up, I don't want to fail, I don't want to be less than or not be, doing a good job. And so we feel like if I just control all the details, then nothing's going to slip through the cracks and everything's going to be fine. But the reality is like especially in business and in life it's like other people need opportunities to get better. Like think about when we both play music for fun. First time you were learning an instrument, you had to have permission to be really bad at something to get good at it, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when I'm doing a project I'm like, oh, if I just do it all it'll be perfect. But then you get to the end of your capacity, there's only so much you could do in a day. So it's like I want to give other people the opportunity, but you have to be willing to go like it's not going to be perfect, and not being perfect is okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about the on ramp to playing guitar for me was the Doobie Brothers. Like I know
Yeah.
I'm dating myself, but like all of their songs, that was how I learned how to play guitar
Yeah.
because I liked the songs, I knew them all, and then I would just like kind of hack my way through it a little bit at a time, and I thought, oh my gosh, I know how to do this now. But if somebody just said like you're playing Inagata Davida, like
Yeah.
I just
No
would,
way.
yeah, but to like just find an on ramp. And I give myself a lot more grace in finding on ramps than I do sometimes other people is their on ramping. So tell me how you deal with like this idea of patience.
Patience with myself or with
Yeah,
other people?
all the above.
It's funny. I feel like I've gotten better at being patient with other people, and then I hold myself to this standard that's like, come on, man, you should have had this done already.
Oh, isn't that interesting how we can be really hard on ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like a lot of times we're so nicer to other people than we would be to ourselves. And I think again, for me, it comes back to this idea of I was realizing the other day, I grew up doing magic, and magic is all about practice. And there's this saying of like practice makes perfect, but as a magician, they would say perfect practice makes perfect. Like if you practice something and it's not great, you're just going to get better at not doing it great. You have to really like make it perfect. And then I was a kid who grew up in a faith expression that was like you have to do everything right, don't mess up, set an example. And so like every aspect of my life was constant like I got to be perfect. And I realized I carried that into adulthood where now as a dad I'm like I can't mess it up. I got to say the right thing all the time, or as a businessman, I got to make all the right decisions. And I think the hardest thing sometimes is just releasing that pressure and realizing like you got to enjoy the process along the way. It's
Yes.
not enough to get to the finish line if at the end of it you crash and burn. Like you have to enjoy the journey along the way, which is funny. Like the new special is called Enjoy the Ride because it's all about this idea of like learning to be present and in the moment and not be so someday it's going to be great. Like right now is pretty great. Just relax and take the pressure off a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes getting people to like kind of settle into their seat on the bus is letting them know this is a safe place.
Yeah.
So, for instance, even in this podcast, we'll just say, "Hey, faith, guide your steps," and we're just not making an assumption that faith is the biggest deal for everybody. And I think I've appreciated that in others. I'll want to let people to know that if it is, it's something important to me too.
Yeah.
And so you can let people know this is a safe place, sometimes by letting people know about your failures or the setback that you've encountered, where you say like, gosh, I want to be at this place. I'm just not there yet. You might have some hopes or aspirations to say, I have these ambitions, but I'm just not there yet. I'm still trying to figure that one out. There's something about very invitational about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great way to have people, not just in magic, but in life, to just buy in, to say, oh, you're like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the reasons I love using magic as a metaphor. Is it like it immediately snaps you out of feeling like you've got it all figured out, or you had to, because when you see something, especially nowadays, like we have supercomputers in our pocket that give us all the answers. The minute I can show you something that you don't understand, now all of a sudden I'm opened up to like, maybe there's something else I don't understand.
I like that you give kind of doing these illusions kind of a new definition. I remember some Midwest city that we pulled into, and a woman called the police because there's a guy doing magic in the church. It was kind of like Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't up there doing ritual sacrifices. You're actually just doing like making chairs disappear or something. And, but for her, with her background, her experience, her whatever she brought to that evening, this was like worthy of calling 911.
Right. Yeah. And I get it. I mean, I grew up, my grandma didn't love card tricks. She thought if you played cards, you'd grow up to be a gambler or worse, a magician. You know, it was like, and so I always tell people, like, if this weirds you out, think less Harry Potter, more Narnia. You know, it's funny. We can do, you know, a lot of times in church, we'll do plays and no one stands up and goes, that guy's not really Judas, you know, but if you do a magic trick there, it's just but we're just playing pretend.
Getting back to something that you'd said before, it's the this phrase that I'd heard at Disneyland, that suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Oh my gosh, that's the greatest, right? When you watch a movie and you watch a movie that is so good that it can take you out of whatever moment you're in, the stress of work, the challenges at home, and you can just be fully present to this story that's unfolding. And I think the suspension of disbelief, that be able to just go like, I'm just part of this. I'm just experiencing this right now. I don't have to be in control of this. That's really where we're trying to get with life, right? You say this thing all the time that I love, which I think is a statement they say in the South of like, be where your feet are, right? That's something that you talk about a lot. And I think it's like so hard as a human sometime to just realize that I'm a participant in this thing. I'm not, you know, orchestrating it all. And that's why I love that. I love that a great song can do that, that a great magic trick can do that, that it can suspend disbelief, that for just a moment, we don't have to understand it all to enjoy it all. And I think that's where the beauty is in life.
Yeah. And that's actually such a gift we can give to ourselves, is to say, you know what, I don't need to have it all figured out. But I figured out that there's this particular person that presses all the wrong buttons for me. When I get in their zip code, like I just get activated.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to try to do is not get in that zip code as often.
Yeah.
I don't have to think bad things about them. I just don't need to have them camp out. And if I just find out if I'm around them, then it makes me feel anxious or makes me feel something that isn't it isn't a positive thing for me.
Right.
It could be like an in-law, it could be an outlaw, it could be, you figure out what it is and then just find a kind way to do that. You don't need to kind of get up in their grill and say, here's my declaration of rights. I need to do this. And when you do that, it made me feel this. I feel like, gosh, with a brief period of time we have here, I don't want to give people a laundry list of what they need to sort out.
I feel like this last couple of years, I've had so many people who have talked to me about how like they're realizing there's more people in their orbit like that than maybe there were before. I don't know if it's because, you know, everyone's sharing their opinions constantly and maybe you realize you don't see eye to eye with folks, but other than like just avoiding being around those folks, how do you do that when you're in a moment with somebody and you feel like, man, this person is really maybe not helping me love people as a whole? how do you you know, trigger like, but just like put yourself in a different mindset?
Part of that is to realize, like, hey, I'm getting activated right here.
Yeah.
I either want to slug a wall or hurl or something,
Yeah.
but like there's something going on that isn't helpful. And for me, I've said that before, like to look over their head and
Yeah.
imagine a thought bubble. And in it, they're thinking, I'm being really helpful right now.
Oh yeah.
So whether they're trying to straighten you out in your faith or in your marriage or in your
Right.
whatever, they want you to do this or that. They're thinking they're being super helpful. And I'm thinking like, read the room.
Right.
Like,
Right.
actually, that isn't helpful. But if you could just kind of get in their shoes, I'm not saying adopt their viewpoint, but to say that this is what they evidently think is the most helpful contribution they can make right now to this conversation, to this situation. And sometimes I want to just say, I just don't think they were reading the room.
Right.
So I think I assume that they like puppies like I do, and they like people like I do, but they don't seem to like the person in front of them. And it's evident that they're kind of not reading the room. Because if they're reading the room, you know, that I was reading that most of us, we hear our voice, like I'm hearing mine now. And that is not what my voice sounds like. That my voice sounds different than the way that I hear it. And I think that would be like an apt description. People, they think people are hearing this.
Right.
They're actually, we're hearing something like a little bit different. It's just a pitch or two different.
Katie and I were just talking about that because I was telling her, I feel like I've always felt like I had a really high voice. And then someone told me like, oh, your voice is lower. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, like you're
what are you talking about? Yeah.
See
it I just picture myself as
yeah. So I think the upshot as we kind of land the plane is to be mindful of our need for wonder in our life, and go take a walk, go get a magnifying glass and look at something closely. You can burn ants with it, but what if you instead looked at a leaf or a person? What if you hovered over each of the important people in your life? What if you took the thumbprint of your kid and be the only person on earth that has memorized their thumbprint? Like you could draw their thumbprint and nobody else could. This isn't so you could hack into their bank account later, but it could be awesome. But instead that you took the time to look closely at something, so that we're not just up in everybody's grill about our opinions, because I want to be remembered for my love, not known for my opinions.
Well, Bob, this is such a perfect time to share this, because we're coming up on, Thanksgiving's coming up right here. Everyone's going to be with people that, you know, some people that they can't wait to see. And in reality, some people are going to be in situations that they've been stressed about having to get together. So it's a good reminder to look for those different perspectives and to see the beauty in everyone, and to just be a little more open than maybe we are, you know, on a daily basis.
And to realize that this feels like a little bit of a pressure cooker.
Right.
This is a relationship that feels a little bit more contrived or forced than would be normal and that you would pick. But you know what? For the next 3 hours, I'm going to just do this kind of selfless act of being fully engaged. I'm just going to imagine they have just great intentions, even if they're not reading the room, or they're not reading me, or they're just misreading the way to engage people with their people skills or lack of people skills, to just give them a little break. Like that idea, grace never seems fair unless you need some.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It feels really fair, like that I should get some.
And if all else fails and it's getting really tense, you just put on Enjoy the Ride on YouTube right now with me, Taylor Hughes.
There you go. How could you not have that? Plus, you'll learn a trick or two. You can try it and like just say that you can actually change things up. So I'm glad for the book, Misdirection. It's going to be out very soon. And thanks for recording this special. I'm just so glad you're doing that.
Thank you. And I will say this, Bob won't. He'll say, "Don't say this," but Bob is the reason the special came out, because I've been talking about you just need a friend sometimes. Sometimes you just need a friend who knows what is in your heart and to call it out. And I've been talking about wanting to do a new one, and Bob's like, let's just do it. Bob came out. We had a great time. You came out to the night.
That was a fun time.
And people showed up because you came.
No,
and then I was there.
I had a really good time. I was still trying to figure out, rifling through all of your luggage, still trying to figure out how you do these things. Well, Taylor, thanks for being a good friend to me and for so many people. You're one of the safe guys in my life. In pinch points that I've had, I've gotten on the phone to you to just say, like, well, this stinks.
Yeah.
And you've kind of talked me off the ledge. And we do fun things. We do gatherings at Disneyland and up at the Oaks and all that. So whenever I'm like getting together, like, you're always there. So thanks for being that guy.
Love you, buddy.
All right. Love you too. All right, you guys, you've been listening to the Dream Big podcast. And I hope what you'll do is take some of these ideas that we have and actually not just agree with them, but think about this. The next 5 minutes is the best 5 minutes. That's where you actually go do something about it. So agreeing gives you your brain is saying, I'm doing something, you're doing jack. What I want you to do is actually engage that difficult person, find the whimsy, figure out a magic trick, but something that you will then bring to the people and just say, I'm trying to grow my character. And that is the kind of ambition that starts compounding on itself and leads to a beautiful life. All right. We'll talk to you next week.